filthy thief! Where did you hide it?
Vivian Anderson glared at him, her eyes blazing with anger, her champagne glass trembling in her hand.
Madam, I never touched that necklace.
$4 million worth of diamonds gone.
And you think I don't know who took them?
She stepped closer, her voice rising to a scream.
I knew it from the moment my husband hired you! You disgusting thief!
I was in the kitchen all night, madam.
She laughed, a sharp, maniacal laugh.
Officer! Arrest! This beast before he hides my diamonds!
The sound of handcuffs clicked. The sound echoed on the marble floor like a gunshot. The black chef in the white coat didn't flinch. He just looked at her. She picked the wrong man to call a thief, because once upon a time, he was the one putting jewel thieves in handcuffs. 8 weeks earlier, Stamford, Connecticut. 4:45 a.m. The espresso machine hissed in a small two-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a quiet brick building. Franklin Davis stood at the counter in a worn leather apron, pulling a shot of coffee with the same steady focus most men reserve for surgery. He was 42 years old, broad-shouldered, with the kind of calm in his hands that came from doing difficult work for a long time. He sipped his coffee, then started his mise en place. Fresh pasta dough rested under a damp towel. A whole turbot lay on butcher paper, glistening under the kitchen light. He plated a single breakfast for himself. Soft scrambled eggs, sourdough toast, a half orange, the way he plated everything else, precisely, beautifully, as if someone important were about to eat it. On the wall above his small dining table, 3 things hung side by side. A diploma from the Cordon Bleu, Paris, a photograph of the younger Franklin in a dark suit shaking hands with the director of the FBI, and a folded American flag inside a triangular glass case. Before he left, he stopped in front of a small framed photo on the bookshelf. A woman with kind eyes and a Navy FBI windbreaker holding a coffee cup, laughing at something off camera. He pressed 2 fingers to the glass. "See you tonight, baby," he whispered. Then he picked up his knife roll and walked out the door. By 6 a.m., he was driving through the wrought iron gates of the Anderson estate in Greenwich. 22 acres of manicured lawn, hedge trimmed in geometric perfection, with a 4-story Georgian mansion sitting at the center like something out of a magazine. The kind of place where old money lived behind even older walls. Senators came here. Museum chairs came here. Hedge fund kings came here. Franklin parked in the service lot, walked past the rose garden, and entered through the kitchen door. He had been hired 3 months ago through a top-tier agency after a glowing referral from a chef in Manhattan. His resume mentioned a career change from public service. Vivian Anderson had skimmed it once and tossed it aside. The kitchen was twice the size of his apartment. Copper pots hung from a wrought iron rack. The marble island gleamed under pendant lights. Outside the window, the autumn morning was rolling pink and gold across the lawn. He inhaled. Fresh thyme from the herb garden, the faint sweetness of yesterday's lemon tart, and got to work. His duties were simple on paper: 3 meals for the family, sourcing ingredients from Union Square Green Market twice a week, catering for the Andersons' famous parties, including the upcoming Founders Gala in 2 months. In practice, Franklin ran the household kitchen like a federal operation. He knew every staff member's name. He learned the housekeeper's coffee orders, the groundskeeper's kids' birthdays, the butler's bad shoulder. Within 2 weeks, every staff member in the house quietly loved him. Vivian Anderson, however, did not. She entered the kitchen that morning in a cream silk robe, sunglasses indoors, holding a phone to her ear. She walked past Franklin as if he were a piece of furniture. Then, mid-conversation with a friend, loud enough for him to hear, "Edward keeps hiring diversity hires from the city. I told him you can't trust them, but he gets these ideas every couple of years." She laughed. "I'll just count the silver tonight." Franklin kept slicing shallots. He didn't look up. He didn't react. A faint, knowing smile touched the corner of his mouth, the way a man smiles when he's seen this exact movie before. 2 weeks in, Vivian hosted an intimate dinner for 8. Wives of financiers, a Vogue editor, a Met board member. Franklin served pan-seared sea bass with beurre blanc, a dish he'd perfected in Paris. The table went silent at the first bite. Caroline Brown leaned toward Vivian. "Where on earth did you find a chef this talented?" Vivian smiled tightly, not looking at Franklin as he refilled wine.
"Oh, you know Edward. He has this whole giving back phase. We got him through one of those programs, the kind that hires people with colorful pasts."
The table went very quiet. Caroline lowered her eyes to her plate. The Vogue editor coughed. Franklin tilted the bottle, voice warm as honey. "May I refill your glass, ma'am?" He turned back toward the kitchen. Only one person at the table noticed his jaw tighten for a single second. Edward's 19-year-old daughter Maggie, half hidden at the corner reading a book. What Vivian didn't realize was that the small enamel pin on Franklin's chef coat, the one shaped like a tiny olive branch, wasn't decoration. It had been recording her, word for word, since the soup course. 3 weeks before the gala, the Cartier necklace arrived. Vivian had announced it at breakfast like she was unveiling a royal jewel, which, in a way, she was. 92 carats of yellow and white diamonds, a piece her grandmother had won at a Sotheby's auction in the 1960s, appraised at $4 million. A registered Cartier archive piece, the kind of necklace that traveled with its own paperwork, its own armored courier, and its own insurance binder thick as a phone book. What Franklin noticed wasn't the necklace. It was the safe. Vivian had insisted the piece be stored not in the master bedroom vault, not in the home office, but in the small butler's pantry safe, the one tucked into the wall just off the kitchen. The chef's territory. The one room where a black man on the staff could be reliably placed at any hour of any day. Franklin watched from the prep station as Gregory Wilson, the head of estate security, personally installed it. Wilson was a stocky man in his 50s with cold eyes and the swagger of someone who had badged his way through life. He changed the safe's combination without informing the agency, against household protocol. Franklin slid a sheet pan into the oven, looked away, and made a quiet mental file. Then a written one, that night, in the moleskin notebook he kept locked in his car. 2 mornings later, Vivian stormed into the kitchen mid-service. A sauté pan hissed on the burner. 6 staff members froze in place. Vivian was holding a single black pearl earring up between 2 manicured fingers, her face flushed crimson. "Where's the other one?" Franklin looked up calmly from the cutting board. "Ma'am?" "My pearls, from Mikimoto. Don't play stupid with me." She marched toward him, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. 2 estate security guards stood in the doorway behind her, arms crossed. "Empty your pockets, right now, in front of everyone." Franklin set down his knife. He wiped his hands on his apron. His voice was even. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson." He emptied his pockets onto the marble island, one item at a time. A moleskin notebook, a chef's tasting spoon, a single car key on a plain metal ring. Nothing else. No earring, no pearl, not even loose change. Vivian stared at the small collection like it had personally insulted her. The housekeepers in the doorway watched, lips parted. The sous chef behind Franklin held very still. Somebody's hand shook so hard, a ladle rattled against a pot. "Strange," Vivian said finally. Her voice had dropped half a register. "I could have sworn I saw you near my room this morning." Franklin's apron smelled faintly of charred butter. The sauté pan behind him was burning. He didn't move to save it. "I haven't been upstairs all week, ma'am." She turned on her heel and walked out without another word. The earring was found in her own jewelry box exactly 1 hour later. There was no apology, no retraction, no mention of it again. Ever. That night, Franklin drove home and unlocked the travel case he kept under his bed. Inside were 3 items most chefs do not own. A discreet lapel pin with a hidden audio recorder, legal under Connecticut's one-party consent law. A small high-resolution dash cam he installed inside his SUV that very night, angled at the estate's service entrance, and a backup smartphone running a continuous encrypted upload to a secure cloud server he hadn't touched in 6 years. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't even tell his agency. He just started documenting. Every entry, every exit, every comment, every direct order from Vivian, time-stamped, backed up, triple redundant. Then he picked up a burner phone and dialed a 202 area code. "Howard, it's Franklin. Probably nothing, but keep your phone on this month." He hung up before the voicemail beep finished. 1 week before the gala, the second test came. Vivian announced that a $12,000 Hermes scarf had vanished from the laundry room. This time she did not call the agency. She did not call the housekeeping supervisor. She picked up the phone and dialed the Greenwich Police Department directly. 2 uniformed officers arrived within 15 minutes. The senior of the 2 was Officer Caldwell, a square-jawed man in his 40s who carried himself like he had answered 100 wealthy lady calls in the past month alone. The radio on his shoulder crackled and chirped. Franklin was summoned from the kitchen to the front foyer. He came in his chef coat, hands clean, expression neutral. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the stained glass window above the staircase, throwing red and blue petals across the marble floor. Vivian was already mid-performance. "Officer, he's the new one, from the city. We never had problems before he came." She waved a hand toward Franklin like she was identifying a suspect in a lineup. "His agency placed him 3 months ago. He's been alone in the laundry hallway at least twice. Twice that I saw." Officer Caldwell turned to Franklin. His voice was even, professional. "Sir, would you be willing to allow me to inspect your personal bag?" Franklin nodded once. He spoke clearly, loud enough for both officers and the lapel pin recorder to capture every syllable. "Officer, I consent to a search of my personal duffel bag only. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle, my locker, or my person. I'd like that on the record, please." Caldwell's eyebrows lifted a fraction of an inch. He had not expected the phrasing. Most household staff in these calls simply nodded and emptied their pockets without a single legal word. "Noted, sir." Franklin retrieved his duffel bag from the staff cloakroom and set it on a small antique side table in the foyer. Caldwell unzipped it slowly. Inside, a stack of food-stained cookbooks, a meat thermometer in a soft case, a leather knife roll, a worn brown wallet, his agency ID badge, and a single folded apron. Nothing else. No scarf. No silk. Nothing remotely Hermes. Caldwell zipped the bag back up. He turned to Vivian. "Ma'am, there's nothing here." Vivian's nostrils flared. "Then he hid it somewhere else, obviously." "Ma'am, with respect, we can't search the entire estate based on a hunch. If you'd like to file a formal report, we can document it, and an insurance—" "Just go." She flicked her hand. "Both of you. Useless." Caldwell looked at Franklin for one long, quiet second. Then he leaned in slightly. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Sir, I'm sorry. We have to respond when we're called." Franklin nodded. His eyes were warm. "You did your job exactly right, officer. Take care of yourself out there." The officers left. The foyer fell silent except for the soft tick of the antique grandfather clock. Vivian stood at the bottom of the staircase, breathing through her nose, glaring at Franklin like he had just personally embarrassed her in front of the help. Then she turned and disappeared up the stairs without another word. That night after service, Franklin was wiping down the marble island when Maggie Anderson appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was barefoot, in pajamas, holding a hardcover copy of The Warmth of Other Suns under one arm. "Chef Frank?" He looked up, smiled gently. "Miss Maggie." She climbed onto a bar stool, set the book down, and stared at the counter. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes were red around the edges. "I'm so sorry about today, about the police. She does this. She does this to everyone. It's not you." Franklin folded the dish towel slowly. The kitchen smelled of lemon, simmered stock, and the faintest trace of his coffee. Outside the window, a single deer was crossing the moonlit lawn. "Miss Maggie, I appreciate that, I do." His voice was low and steady. "But it is me. It's been me 1,000 times in 1,000 kitchens since I was 14 years old washing dishes in Baltimore. The only thing that changes is how prepared I am for the next time." Maggie looked up, eyes shining. "Prepared for what?" Franklin smiled. He pushed a bowl of warm tomato bisque across the counter toward her, with a small silver spoon resting on the rim. "Eat your soup before it gets cold, Miss Maggie." She picked up the spoon, hesitated, then ate. Outside on the driveway, the security floodlights blinked on. Inside, Franklin slid the dish towel into the laundry bin and quietly checked his lapel pin. The recording light blinked green. 11 hours, 23 minutes, 14 seconds of audio, backed up to the cloud at midnight. Vivian Anderson thought she was rehearsing a performance. Franklin Davis knew exactly what kind of show she was building toward. Because in his old life, he had taken down 4 people just like her, and he had learned the most important rule of all. You let them write the script themselves. Then you let them perform it. And then, only then, you bring out the tape. The night of the Founders Gala, the Anderson estate looked like a movie set. 200 guests in black tie, 3 United States senators, the CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a Pulitzer-winning columnist for the New York Times, crystal chandeliers blazing overhead, a string quartet playing softly in the conservatory, the smell of white truffle, browned butter, and fresh peonies drifting from the dining room through the entire ground floor. In the kitchen, Franklin ran a 7-course service like a federal operation. 8 sous chefs, 2 pastry assistants, 4 runners, every one of them trained personally by him in the previous 2 weeks. Plates left the pass every 90 seconds. Not one came back. Not one. And on Vivian Anderson's collarbone, glittering under the chandeliers, hung the Cartier necklace. $4 million of yellow and white diamonds framing her throat like a sentence. At 10:42 p.m. between the lamb course and the cheese course, Vivian excused herself from the head table. "Going to change my shoes, darling." She kissed Edward on the cheek and disappeared up the back staircase. At 11:08 p.m. she returned, smiling, hand on Edward's arm, wearing a different necklace, smaller, plainer. Diamonds, yes, but not those diamonds. Franklin saw it through the pass-through window. He didn't stop plating. He didn't even pause, but his eyes flicked once to the kitchen clock and his lips moved in a silent count. At 11:53 p.m., a scream tore through the second floor. It was the kind of scream wealthy women rehearse without knowing it. Pitched, theatrical, perfectly timed to carry down the marble staircase and into the ballroom. Glasses lowered. Conversation died. The string quartet faltered into silence. Vivian came down the stairs already crying, mascara running, one hand pressed to her bare collarbone. "It's gone. It's gone, Edward, the necklace. Somebody took it. Somebody was in my room." Edward stood up, baffled. "Vivian, slow down." "He was in there." She pointed across the room, finger trembling. 20 minutes ago, I asked the chef to bring me a sparkling water. He was in my dressing room." Edward's brow furrowed. "Honey, that was the butler. That was Reginald."
"It was the chef." Her voice rose. "The black one. I saw him."
The ballroom went very still. 200 faces turned toward the kitchen doorway where Franklin had just appeared, drying his hands on a clean white towel. Gregory Wilson stepped forward from the corner of the room with the smooth confidence of a man who had been waiting for his cue. "Mr. Anderson, sir, I have the security log. Chef Davis was in the second-floor corridor at 11:14 p.m. I have it on camera." It was a lie. A flawless, prepared lie. Edward turned slowly toward Franklin. His face was unreadable. Not accusing, but not defending either. Just confused. Just tired. Two of Wilson's private security guards moved at the same time. They crossed the ballroom in long strides, took Franklin by both elbows, and steered him out of view of the guests into the back service hallway behind the kitchen. That's where the mask came off. The hallway was narrow, fluorescent lit, and lined with the rolling laundry bins. Wilson followed them in and locked the door behind himself. Franklin felt the back of his chef coat brush against the cold metal wall. "Empty your pockets, chef." Wilson's voice was low. "Take off the coat. Now." Franklin kept his voice level. "Are you a sworn officer? You're on private property. You'll do what I say." "I'd like the police called then." "The actual police." One of the guards grabbed Franklin's right arm and twisted it sharply behind his back. Pain shot through his shoulder. Franklin did not resist. He went deliberately limp, the way every federal arrest training video on the planet teaches. Protect your spine, vocalize your compliance, never, ever give them a reason. "I am not resisting. I am stating clearly that I am not consenting to this search." Wilson smiled without warmth. He reached into Franklin's chef coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. The pouch wasn't there an hour ago. Franklin knew this with the same calm certainty he knew his own pulse. Wilson tipped the pouch into his open palm. A single yellow diamond, 4 carats, perfectly cut, set in a fragment of platinum casing, as if pried from the Cartier setting. "Well, well," Wilson smiled wider. "You're done, chef." The door opened. Vivian walked in. Alone. She closed the door behind her. The lock clicked. The hallway smelled of detergent and her gardenia perfume, sweet, suffocating, expensive. For the first time, she looked Franklin dead in the eye. The performance was over. No tears, no tremor, just contempt. "You really thought you could walk into my house," she said softly, "and play dress-up in a chef coat? You people are all the same. The only difference is which one of you finally gets caught." She stepped closer, heels clicking on concrete. "Do you know what's going to happen to you? By morning, you'll be on Rikers Island. By next week, you'll be the punchline in the local paper. By next month, my husband and I will be on our yacht in St. Bart's, drinking rosé, and nobody will remember your name." Then she slapped him. It was not a slap to hurt, it was a slap to humiliate. Open palm, full swing across his right cheek. Franklin's head turned with the blow. He did not raise a hand. He did not flinch a second time. He just slowly turned his face back toward her, and for one long second, his eyes were no longer the eyes of a chef. They were the eyes of the man in the photo on his apartment wall. The man who had shaken hands with the director. Vivian didn't see it. She was already turning back toward the door, dusting her palm against her satin gown like she'd touched something unclean. "Get him out of my house." She walked out. In the silence that followed, the only sounds were the hum of the fluorescent light, the soft tick of the antique grandfather clock through the wall, and the gentle vibration against Franklin's chest from his smartwatch, confirming that every word, every footstep, every breath in that hallway had just uploaded to a secure FBI-grade cloud server in Northern Virginia. The actual Greenwich PD arrived at 12:01 a.m. Detective Elena Brooks was the lead on scene. Mid-40s, black, sharp eyes, former NYPD. She had been pulled out of a late dinner with her sister to drive 40 minutes for what dispatch had called a high-priority domestic theft, $4 million in jewelry. She took one look at the chef in the white coat being held by 2 private security guards in a back hallway, and her jaw tightened in a way only her sister would have recognized. Wilson handed her the velvet pouch and the manufactured story. Vivian, back in performance mode, sobbed prettily on cue from the foyer. Edward stood beside her looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 20 minutes. Brooks looked at the diamond in the pouch, then at Franklin. She read him his Miranda rights on the marble floor of the foyer, in front of the dwindling crowd of horrified guests still in evening wear. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Franklin spoke calmly, audibly, with the practiced clarity of a man who had recited this exact response in his head 1,000 times in his career. Detective, I am invoking my right to remain silent. I am requesting an attorney. I do not consent to any further search of my person, my vehicle, or my home. I would like that on record, please. Thank you, ma'am. Brooks blinked. She had been a cop for 22 years. In all that time, she had never, not once, heard a household chef recite Miranda invocation back to her in the correct legal sequence, calm as a Sunday sermon. She filed it away. As they walked Franklin to the cruiser, his hands cuffed behind his back, he glanced once at Maggie. She was crying on the staircase, both hands pressed over her mouth. He spoke softly, just to her. Tell your father to check the insurance filing date. Tell him exactly that, the insurance filing date. Then the cruiser door closed. At Greenwich PD, they processed him in the standard sequence: fingerprints, mugshot, property bag. Brooks watched him through the one-way glass of the holding cell as he sat down, hands folded, back straight, breathing slow, not slumped, not pacing, not protesting, just waiting. Her partner came up beside her. Brooks, you good? She didn't take her eyes off Franklin. Pull his full background, federal, state, military, run it twice. That is not how a guilty man sits, Tommy. She paused. That is how a federal agent sits. At 1:47 a.m., Franklin got his one phone call. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call his agency. He didn't call family. He dialed a 202 area code from memory. The phone rang twice. A man's voice picked up, alert even at this hour. Taylor. Howard. It's Franklin. His voice was low and even. Code phrase. Sourdough. I'm in Greenwich PD holding. Activate the protocol. Silence on the other end. One breath. How long do you need? 6 hours. You'll have 4. The line went dead. Detective Brooks was watching through the one-way glass when Franklin hung up. She turned to her partner. Who does a chef call at 2 a.m. with a code phrase? She got her answer 26 minutes later. A secured FBI fax came through to the front desk marked Urgent, Federal Liaison. The night sergeant walked it to Brooks's desk and silently set it in front of her. She opened the folder. She didn't speak for a full minute. Inside, an FBI service record, 16 years. Art crime team, major theft unit. Lead agent on 3 Interpol-coordinated international jewelry recoveries. 2 commendations for valor. The Director's Award for Excellence. $86 million in stolen impressionist paintings recovered from an Eastern European smuggling ring. Retired honorably, 6 years ago, after the line-of-duty death of his wife, Special Agent Sarah Davis. Photograph attached. Same calm eyes, same steady jaw. Same man currently sitting in her holding cell in a wrinkled chef coat. Brooks closed the folder. She took a long sip of cold coffee. She stood up. She walked down the hallway, unlocked the cell, and stepped inside. Franklin looked up. She crossed her arms, spoke quietly. Mr. Davis, or do you prefer Special Agent Davis? His mouth lifted at one corner, a small, tired smile. Just Franklin is fine, Detective. I retired 6 years ago. She set the folder on the bench beside him. Why didn't you say anything? Out there, in the foyer. You could have ended this in 30 seconds. Franklin looked down at his hands, then back up. Because if I had, she would have lawyered up. The diamond in my pocket would have disappeared. The pre-loss insurance filing would have been quietly withdrawn. The 2 prior victims would have stayed buried. And she would have done it again in 6 months, to the next black man unlucky enough to walk into her kitchen. He paused. I needed her to commit, fully, on the record. Tonight, she did. Brooks exhaled, long and slow. She sat down. Okay. Tell me what you've got. What followed was the quietest, most methodical demolition Detective Elena Brooks had witnessed in her 22-year career. Franklin spoke for 43 minutes. Calm, numbered. Each piece of evidence in order. 1. Audio recordings. Legal under Connecticut single-party consent. 3 months of continuous documentation, including Mrs. Anderson in a back service hallway tonight, making a racially explicit threat and confessing on tape to having done this before, including the slap. Brooks's eyebrows lifted. She slapped you? Yes, ma'am. On tape? Audio only, but the impact is unmistakable. And 2 witnesses were in the hallway, her own guards. They will flip the moment they're offered cooperating witness versus co-defendant. Brooks wrote in her notebook. 2. Dashcam footage. My personal vehicle, parked in the service lot. Clear view of the rear loading entrance. At 11:14 p.m. tonight, Gregory Wilson loaded a black duffel bag, dimensions consistent with the Cartier display case, into a Range Rover registered under his late mother's maiden name. 40 minutes before Mrs. Anderson discovered the necklace was missing. Brooks's pen stopped moving. 3. The diamond planted in my pocket. Franklin's eyes were calm. It's a fake, high-grade cubic zirconia replica. The cut's wrong. The brilliance is off by maybe 9%. Lab confirmation, one day. The real necklace is in a public storage facility in Port Chester, Unit B12. Wilson drove there straight from the gala. Brooks set her pen down entirely. 4. Mrs. Anderson filed a pre-loss notification with Lloyd's of London at 9:42 a.m. yesterday morning, 2 hours before the theft was reported tonight. That's wire fraud. That's insurance fraud across state lines. That's federal. Franklin folded his hands on his lap. I have all of it. Triple redundant, backed up to a secure FBI-grade cloud server. Howard Taylor, Section Chief, Art Crime Section, J. Edgar Hoover Building, has had a read-only copy since the moment her insurance filing went through. He's already briefed an AUSA. Daniel Williams, Southern District of New York. By the time we walk out of this station, Detective, this case will have an FBI case number and a federal docket. Silence. Brooks looked at him for a very long time. Then she stood. She picked up the folder. She pressed the intercom. Dispatch, Brooks. 3 search warrants. 90 minutes. The Anderson Estate, Wilson's residence, Public Storage Unit B12, Port Chester. Get me the federal liaison on the line. This just became a joint case. She turned back to Franklin. Sir, I owe you an apology. Franklin shook his head gently. You owe me nothing, Detective. You did exactly what an officer is supposed to do, exactly the way you were trained. The people who owe me an apology. He stood up slowly, brushing his chef coat, are about to be very, very busy. The cell door swung open with a soft beep. His coat was returned, folded, and pressed. Outside the east window, the first pink line of dawn bled across the Connecticut sky. The hunt had begun. At 7:14 a.m., a convoy rolled through the iron gates of the Anderson estate. 2 Greenwich PD cruisers, an unmarked black FBI SUV, a second SUV carrying Caroline Mitchell from Lloyd's of London, briefcase open on her lap, a federal forensic team in Navy windbreakers. And in the back of Brooks's cruiser, in a fresh chef coat with a paper cup of black coffee, Franklin Davis. Vivian opened the front door in a cream silk robe. She was expecting a victory call from the prosecutor. She had been awake since 5, rehearsing her press statement. Then she saw the badges. Then she saw Franklin. Her face drained white, then flooded red. What is he doing here? Brooks lifted a folded document into the morning light. Mrs. Anderson, this is Special Agent in Charge Howard Taylor of the FBI Art Crime Section. This is a federal search warrant. This is a state arrest warrant, and this is former Special Agent Franklin Davis, here as a federal consultant on the active investigation into the insurance fraud and false police report you committed last night. Step aside, ma'am. Vivian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is a misunderstanding. Step aside.
My husband will sue every one of you for everything you—
Step aside. She stumbled backward. The federal team flowed past her, the smell of fresh-cut lilies mixed with cold metal as equipment cases opened on her marble floor. She tried every excuse in rapid sequence. I was confused last night. I'd been drinking. He must have planted those recordings somehow. Edward! Edward! Edward Anderson appeared at the top of the staircase in a bathrobe, his face the gray color of a man who had not slept. He looked down into his own foyer at the federal warrant, at the FBI badge, and at Franklin Davis standing quietly by the door. He walked down the stairs, slowly. He did not look at his wife. He walked straight to Franklin. Mr. Davis. Chef, his voice cracked. I owe you the largest apology a man can owe another man. I should have seen this. I have seen this, and I chose not to. I am so deeply sorry. Franklin nodded once. Sir, you couldn't have known. That's the thing, son. Edward's eyes were wet. I did know. I just didn't want to. Then he turned to his wife. For the first time in 22 years of marriage, he raised his voice in his own home. 22 years, Vivian. Edward, please, you have to listen. 22 years. I gave you my name, 3 foundations, every door in this country, and what did you do with it? His voice climbed. You used my last name as a weapon against people who carried trays for you. You filed an insurance claim before the theft was even reported. They were stealing from us. I had to. No one was stealing. You were. The foyer fell silent. A federal agent stopped mid-step. Brooks paused her radio call. Even Vivian stopped breathing. Edward turned to the man in a charcoal suit behind him, his personal counsel. Howard, right now, freeze every joint account. Cancel every credit card in her name, file for divorce before noon, and call the Davis Family Culinary Trust. $10 million wired in. Today. Vivian sank against the banister. Edward, please. He looked at her one last time, voice dropping to something very final. You called him you people in my house in front of my daughter. There is no version of this where I am still your husband. He turned away. Maggie was on the landing in jeans and an oversized sweatshirt. She walked down the stairs past her mother as if she were furniture and stopped in front of Franklin. She didn't hug him. She reached out, took his hand, and squeezed it once. Thank you for not breaking, Chef. Then she walked out the front door into the morning sun. Behind them, Brooks's radio crackled. Brooks, Unit 3 at Port Chester, confirmed recovery. Cartier necklace intact in Unit B12, approximately $180,000 cash. Burner phone with 3 months of texts to a VA contact. Wilson's in custody. Brooks lowered the radio. The handcuffs were already in her hand. Vivian Anderson, you are under arrest for filing a false police report, grand larceny, insurance fraud, and federal wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The handcuffs clicked shut on Vivian's wrists at 8:11 a.m. The same sound in the same foyer on the same marble that had clicked shut on Franklin's wrists 9 hours earlier. Only this time on the right wrist. By noon, the first news van pulled up at the gate. By 3 p.m., the story had gone national. The investigation didn't stop at the Anderson estate. Within 72 hours, federal forensic accountants had pulled 3 years of Vivian Anderson's personal records. What they found turned a state larceny case into something far darker. She had done this before.
twice. In the spring 2 years ago, a Honduran housekeeper named Marisol had been quietly fired from the Anderson estate after Vivian discovered a missing emerald brooch. Marisol couldn't afford a lawyer. She signed a non-disclosure, accepted a small severance, and disappeared back to a one-bedroom apartment in Yonkers. The insurance payout on the stolen brooch? $900,000. The year before that, a black laundry attendant named Denise Hawkins had been arrested on similar charges. She pled out to a misdemeanor with a public defender, served 18 months on probation, and lost her right to ever work in domestic service again. The insurance payout on the stolen sapphire bracelet? $1,700,000. Both prior victims were women of color. Both had been carefully selected for one reason: nobody would believe them, and nobody would fight for them. Until now. A USA Daniel Williams of the Southern District of New York filed a superseding federal indictment that ran 52 pages. Wire fraud, multiple counts. Insurance fraud across state lines. Witness tampering, after evidence emerged that Vivian had tried to bribe Marisol's cousin to convince her to flee to Honduras. Conspiracy, filing false police reports. And then the count that made the front page of every newspaper in America. A federal hate crime enhancement under Title 18, United States Code, Section 249. Based on her own recorded words, her own documented pattern, her own confessed contempt. Gregory Wilson took an early plea 3 days in. 10 years, full cooperation, every text, every phone call, every audio recording from the past 4 years of working her schemes. He walked the prosecution through every detail of the Cartier setup in a single afternoon. The media did the rest. The New York Times ran a front-page Sunday feature titled "The Pattern in the Pantry." Reporters tracked down Marisol in Yonkers. They tracked down Denise Hawkins, now working a night shift at a Walmart in New Jersey. Both women, for the first time in years, told their stories on the record. Both women cried. So did most of America watching the 60-minute segment that aired 3 weeks later. Franklin himself declined every interview. He thanked the producers politely and pointed them toward Marisol, Denise, and a civil legal aid attorney in Brooklyn instead. Something else happened that no one expected. A small non-profit named the Davis Family Culinary Trust, founded years earlier by Franklin in memory of his late wife Sarah, to help children of fallen federal agents and incarcerated parents attend culinary school, received a wave of donations. The first $10 million arrived from Edward Anderson, exactly as he had promised in his own foyer. The next $3 million arrived from strangers, from line cooks, from church groups, from a children's book author in Maine who wrote a personal note, from a retired FBI director who simply signed his name and sent a check. By the time the trial began, the trust had funded scholarships for 78 students. The trial itself lasted 6 weeks in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. Vivian rejected 3 plea deals because, as her own attorney would later tell a reporter, she refused to be lectured to by a prosecutor. She walked into court each day in tailored cream suits, chin raised, the same dismissive expression she had worn in her own foyer. By week 3, that expression was gone. The prosecution called 23 witnesses, 3 forensic accountants, 2 FBI agents, Marisol, Denise, 3 former housekeepers who had quit without telling anyone why, Detective Brooks, Gregory Wilson in handcuffs testifying under cooperation. Then, on the 8th day, the prosecution called Franklin Davis. He wore a charcoal suit, a simple white shirt, his old Federal Service medal pinned discreetly inside his lapel where only he knew it sat against his chest. The defense attorney, a polished man in his 60s who had once represented 2 senators, took the cross-examination. He had clearly been instructed to break Franklin's composure. He tried, for 2 hours. He suggested Franklin was a disgruntled employee. He suggested Franklin had set up his client out of racial resentment. He suggested Franklin's evidence had been selectively edited. Franklin answered each question with 3 sentences or fewer: calm, polite, unmovable. Then the attorney made his final mistake. "Mr. Davis," he said, smoothing his tie, "isn't it true that you have spent your entire post-FBI career searching for a wealthy white client to bring down, to settle some unresolved grievance?" The courtroom held its breath. Franklin tilted his head slightly. He let the silence stretch a full 5 seconds. "Counsel," his voice was low and even, "I spent 16 years of my career putting handcuffs on people who looked exactly like your client. I didn't need to frame her. I just needed to let her be herself on tape." The jury, 4-person, a retired school teacher from Brooklyn, covered her mouth. The jury deliberated 9 hours. They returned guilty on all 14 counts. The sentencing came 3 months later, on a cold Tuesday morning in Manhattan. Vivian wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry. Her hair was thinner. Her hands shook visibly when she stood. Federal Judge Helen Carter spoke from the bench before sentencing. The transcript would be read aloud on national television within the hour. "Mrs. Anderson, you wielded your wealth and your race as weapons against working people who had no defense. You did so not once, not twice, but as a documented pattern of conduct. You did so against a man who, unknown to you, had dedicated 16 years of his life to protecting the very rule of law you tried to subvert. The court does not consider irony a sentencing factor. The court considers deterrence." She lifted the page. 12 years in federal prison. $6 million in restitution payable to Ms. Marisol Reyes, Ms. Denise Hawkins, and Mr. Franklin Davis in equal parts. Forfeiture of $18 million in personal assets. A permanent ban on serving as an officer or board member of any United States nonprofit. Vivian's knees gave out. She was caught by her own attorney before she hit the floor. The marshals walked her out through the back, and for the first time in her life, the cameras outside caught a clear image of Vivian Anderson, mascara-streaked, lips trembling, sobbing without elegance, climbing into the back of a federal transport van. The image was on every screen in America by sundown. Edward Anderson finalized the divorce within 90 days. He sold the Greenwich estate to a museum trust and donated 40% of the proceeds, anonymously, to civil legal aid funds for domestic workers across 3 states. The Cartier necklace itself, recovered intact, was auctioned through the divorce settlement. The full proceeds went straight to the Davis Family Culinary Trust. The Greenwich Country Club revoked Vivian's membership in writing. 2 charity boards she had chaired for a decade quietly removed her name from their walls. Bastion Risk Group, the security firm that had employed Gregory Wilson, was fined heavily and lost its state license. The next morning, the Washington Post ran an editorial under a single, quiet headline. In a country that often fails this story did not fail. 1 year later. A small restaurant opened on a quiet side street in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. 38 seats, open 6 nights a week. A hand-painted sign above the door read in simple black letters, "Magnolia and Iron." Named for his late wife's favorite flower and for his grandmother's cast-iron skillet, the one she had used to feed 5 grandchildren on a single Baltimore stove. By 6 p.m. on opening night, the line stretched around the block. Inside, the dining room glowed with candlelight and the smell of slow-braised short rib, cornbread, and butter sizzling against hot iron. Franklin Davis ran the kitchen in his usual quiet way. Sleeves rolled, apron clean, calling out orders without raising his voice. His sous chefs, every one of them hired from the Davis Family Culinary Trust scholarship, moved around him like a small orchestra. Out on the floor, in a black apron, was Maggie Anderson. She had asked Franklin 3 months after the trial if he would let her learn from the ground up. He had asked why. She had said, "Because I want to be the kind of person you thought I could be." She started as a dishwasher. She earned floor manager in 9 months. She called Franklin Chef. He called her Miss Maggie. Every regular guest assumed she was his daughter, and after a while, neither of them corrected anyone. Detective Elena Brooks ate at the bar twice a month. Howard Taylor flew up from Washington for the chef's tasting on his birthday every year. Marisol Reyes, now back in her own apartment, paid for in cash from the restitution, sent Franklin a Christmas card every December with a photo of her 2 kids. Denise Hawkins came in on her 39th birthday. Her bill, mysteriously, was on the house. Vivian Anderson, meanwhile, was an inmate at Federal Correctional Institution Danbury, serving year 1 of 12. Her appeals had been denied. Her assets were liquidated. Her former social circle had stopped using her name in public. Franklin still consulted part-time for the FBI art crime team. 3 new agents he had personally mentored, every one of them a woman of color, recruited through a fellowship he had funded, were working active cases out of the New York field office. The story ends on a quiet Tuesday night. Franklin alone in his kitchen after close. The dining room dark, the pass wiped down. The only light was the small lamp above the cutting board. His phone buzzed. He picked it up. It was a text from a new sous chef he had hired 6 weeks earlier, a 23-year-old black kid from Bed-Stuy who had spent 2 years in a kitchen where the head chef called him Boy. The message read, "Chef, long shift today. Just wanted to say thank you for treating me like a person. Nobody in any kitchen has ever done that before." Franklin read it twice. He set the phone down. He picked up a clean dish towel, folded it, and placed it on the rack. Then he typed his reply with one slow thumb. "You don't owe me thanks. You owe the next one in the door." He turned off the kitchen light and locked up. Outside, the autumn rain had just started to fall on the Lower East Side, soft against the brick and the brass door handle. Franklin pulled his collar up, smiled at no one in particular, and walked home. Franklin Davis didn't win because he was a former federal agent. He won because, long before the badge, he understood the most important lesson anyone can learn. Dignity is not granted by people who hate you. Dignity is the thing you keep recording, keep documenting, keep cooking, keep showing up with, until the truth catches up with the lie. The truth always does. It just needs us to keep the tape running. So I want to hear from you. If you had been standing in Franklin's chef coat that night, knowing what he knew, holding the recordings he held, would you have spoken up sooner? Or would you have done exactly what he did and let her hang herself with her own rope? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read every one. Hit the like button if Franklin's patience taught you something today. Share this with the one person in your life who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel, because next week we're telling the story of a janitor at a Fortune 500 company who got mocked in the elevator by the new vice president, and who turned out to be the man whose signature was on her hiring paperwork. You don't want to miss it. Stay safe, stay kind, and remember, the right thing, done quietly, is still the right thing.